I have to be honest, when I was looking at this stack of research for today's deep dive, I felt a little exhausted. Just reading the titles. We're talking about resilience, bouncing back, grit, all these buzzwords that frankly feel a bit overused.
They do,
Right.
especially in the last few years.
But there was one concept, it was right in the preamble of the source material, that just, it stopped me.
Yeah.
It wasn't a psychological definition, it was physiological.
Yeah.
It was about marathon training.
The everyday stress resilience hypothesis. It's a very fitting place to start.
Right, but let's actually break that down for a second, because I think people, we all use sports metaphors, but we don't really think about the biology.
The actual mechanism.
The actual mechanism. So if I decide I want to run a marathon, right, and I haven't run in like 5 years,
Okay.
and I just go out tomorrow and try to run 26 miles, I mean, what happens? I don't just fail.
Oh, no. It's much worse than that.
I probably blow out a tendon, or I go into rhabdomyolysis. My body physically collapses because the load just exceeds the structural capacity.
Precisely. You induce trauma, not training. Training requires a very specific biological negotiation.
A negotiation.
Yeah. You apply stress, say, a 3-mile run, which creates these micro tears in the muscle fibers, depletes your glycogen stores. It's an injury, technically, but it's a manageable injury. And then you rest. And during that rest period, the body doesn't just repair the damage, it super compensates.
Really?
It builds the fibers back slightly thicker. It increases the efficiency of your mitochondrial respiration.
Super compensation. That's the key then, isn't it? You stress the system, and the system literally upgrades itself to handle that specific stress better next time.
That is the biological basis of resilience, right there.
So here's my question, and this is really the central mystery of the papers we're looking at today. If resilience is a training process, a biological adaptation like building a muscle, why do we treat it like a personality trait? We look at someone who goes through a divorce or a job loss or a global pandemic, and if they come out smiling, we say, oh, they were born tough. We treat it like they have blue eyes or curly hair.
As if it's fixed.
As if it's fixed. But if the marathon analogy holds up, isn't that completely wrong?
It's not just wrong. Based on the literature we're reviewing from 2020 to 2026, it's scientifically inaccurate. The research suggests that viewing resilience as some static trait, something you either have or you don't, is actually dangerous.
Dangerous how?
It ignores the mechanisms of how that capacity is built and, maybe more importantly, how it's maintained.
Well, that is exactly what we're here to do today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today on NeuroReality, we're stripping away the self-help fluff. We're not here to tell you to just think positive.
Yeah.
We're looking at the hard science, the neurobiology, the endocrinology, the sociology of how human beings withstand force. We want to know, how do some people withstand life's hardest blows while others struggle to recover? And is there a cost to that recovery?
It's great to be here, and I'm glad you emphasized the hard science, because our mission today is really to dismantle what I often call the John Wayne myth of resilience.
The John Wayne myth, I'm guessing you mean the strong, silent type, stoic cowboy.
Exactly. The cultural archetype, right? The guy who takes a bullet, grits his teeth, drinks some whiskey, and just rides into the sunset.
Right.
There's this pervasive idea that resilience is about invulnerability, that you don't feel pain, or that you can just suppress it through sheer force of will. But the data we have here paints a radically different picture. Resilience isn't about being a fortress.
It's about being
a dynamic system. It's biological, it's psychological, and this is the big one, it's multisystemic.
Multisystemic. Okay, that's a dense word. Let's unpack that.
It is, but it's crucial. It means your resilience isn't just inside your head. It's in your blood sugar levels, your sleep cycles, your bank account.
A bank account?
Absolutely. It's in your relationships and even the government policies in your city. It's a negotiation between you and your context.
A negotiation. I like that phrasing. It implies the terms can change.
They always can.
So let's start with the definition. If it's not grit and it's not toughness, what is it? I kept seeing this phrase in the literature, ordinary magic, attributed to Anne Maston. It sounds a bit like a Disney movie, to be honest with you.
It does sound whimsical, doesn't it? But Anne Maston is a heavyweight in developmental psychology. For decades, researchers looked at children who grew up in horrific circumstances, severe poverty, war zones, abusive homes, and yet some of them turned out to be competent, happy, productive adults.
Right. And the assumption was they were special.
The early assumption in the field was that these kids must be super kids.
Like they were genetic anomalies, X-Men or something.
Precisely. The researchers went looking for the super gene or the unique psychological trait that made them invincible. But Masson's conclusion, after years and years of data, was that these children didn't have superpowers. They had ordinary magic.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means they had normative human resources that were functioning correctly.
Normative resources.
Yeah.
So normal stuff.
Normal stuff. It means they had maybe one unconditionally supportive adult, a grandmother, a coach, a teacher. They had a brain that could process information normally. They had a community that offered some level of safety. Their resilience didn't come from being exceptional. It came from the ordinary biological and social systems working the way they're supposed to work.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, resilience is... It's kind of the default setting of a human being, provided the systems around them aren't completely broken.
That is a very, very astute way to put it. The formal definition we're working with today is that resilience is the capacity of a dynamic system to adapt successfully to disturbances.
That sounds like an engineering term.
It applies to bridges, to ecosystems, and, yeah, to human brains. And this definition brings us to the first major pivot in the research we need to talk about. We need to stop talking about resilience as a trait.
And start talking about it as a process. Okay, let's go deep on this. Trait versus process. Because I feel like most of us still operate on the trait model. I look at my friend who runs a company and raises 3 kids and never seems tired, and I think she is a resilient person. That's a label.
Right. The trait model says resilience is global and stable. If you're resilient everywhere, all the time. But the data from the last 6 years it flat out contradicts this. Resilience is domain specific, and it fluctuates over time.
Domain specific. So, using my friend as an example, she might be a tank in the boardroom, but what happens if she faces a different kind of threat?
Exactly. The literature is full of examples of what they call asymmetric resilience.
Yeah.
You might have someone who thrives in a high-pressure professional environment. They can handle economic volatility, criticism, complex problem-solving.
Right.
But they might completely crumble in an interpersonal conflict.
Oh, I think we all know that person. Or maybe we are that person.
It's very common. If you treat resilience as a trait, you'd say, why is she falling apart over a breakup? She handles million-dollar mergers. But if you view it as a process, you realize that the skills and the support system she has for business-like cognitive reframing, a team of assistants, professional detachment, those don't apply to the domain of emotional intimacy.
She hasn't trained for that specific marathon.
She hasn't trained for that marathon.
That is actually,
Yeah.
It's really validating. It means if I'm struggling in one area, say my health or my relationship, it doesn't mean I'm broken.
Not at all.
It just means I lack the specific adaptation for that specific stressor.
Correct. And this fluctuation isn't just about skills, it's about resources. And this is where we have to talk about the RYSE project. This is probably the most significant study in our stack when it comes to the multisystemic nature of resilience.
Yes, the Resilient Youth in Stressed Environments project. This really caught my attention because of the scope. They weren't just looking at kids in a lab, they were comparing entire communities. Drayton Valley in Canada and Secunda in South Africa.
It's a brilliant comparative design. On the surface, these two places look very different. One is in the Canadian prairies, the other in Mpumalanga province. But structurally, they are almost identical.
How so?
They're resource-dependent towns.
One is oil and gas, the other is coal and synthetic fuel.
Right. Which means they are both slaves to the boom and bust economic cycle.
I want to pause on that context for a second.
Yeah.
For listeners who haven't lived in a boom and bust town, it's a very specific kind of psychological pressure. It's not just times are tough, it's that the entire town's mood is pegged to a commodity price. When oil is up, everyone has new trucks, the schools have funding, parents are happy. When oil crashes, the layoffs start, the suicide rates go up, domestic violence spikes.
Yeah.
It's a roller coaster that no single individual controls.
Exactly. And Ungar and Theron, the LEAF researchers, they wanted to know, in that volatile environment, what predicts which teenagers will thrive and which will struggle? Is it just the kids with the most internal grit?
And the answer was...
The findings were a massive check on that individual hero narrative. They found that a young person's resilience was statistically inseparable from their ecosystem.
Inseparable.
In Drayton Valley, when the economy busted, the youth who maintained good mental health weren't just tougher. They were the ones who still had access to a functioning school counselor. They were the ones whose parents had enough savings to buffer the stress at home so it didn't just bleed into the dinner table conversation every night.
So the resilience of the teenager was actually the resilience of the parent's bank account and the municipal government's safety net.
To a very large degree, yes. This is the multisystemic resilience framework in action. You can't expect an individual to be resilient if the systems around them, the family, the school, the economy, are collapsing.
But they didn't just ask these kids how they felt, right? This is NeuroReality, so we have to get to the biology. They did something really interesting with hair samples.
Yes, this is a methodological leap that is becoming the gold standard. In the past, if we wanted to measure stress, we'd take a saliva sample or a blood draw. The problem is that only tells us your cortisol levels right now.
In this second.
Yeah, if you got stuck in traffic on the way to the lab, your cortisol is high. It's just noise.
It's a snapshot, but you wanted a movie.
Exactly. Hair grows at a predictable rate, about 1 centimeter per month. By taking a hair sample and analyzing the accumulated cortisol and DHEA in the shaft, researchers can look back in time. They can see the average stress load over the last 3 months.
That is incredible. So they can literally see a timeline. Here's where the oil price dropped, and here, 2 weeks later, is where the cortisol spiked in the 14-year-olds.
Precisely. They found that in these communities, the macroeconomic shifts were literally written into the chemistry of the children's hair. The systemic stress became biological stress. But, and here is the resilience part, not every kid showed that spike. The kids who had those strong social scaffolding systems, good neighbors, safe parks, supportive teachers, their hair cortisol remained more stable even when the town was crashing.
That connects the dots perfectly. The environment buckers the biology.
It does. And since we're talking about cortisol and biology, I think we need to open up the hood. We've established that environment matters, but what is physically happening inside the brain of a resilient person? When that alarm goes off, what is the actual mechanism?
Let's do it. I think most people have heard about the fight or flight response, but the papers here go much deeper into the HPA axis.
Right. The HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, this is the command chain. You see a threat, let's say an aggressive dog. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenal glands to dump cortisol.
And cortisol is the fuel for the fire.
Cortisol mobilizes energy. It dumps glucose into your bloodstream so your muscles can work. It shuts down non-essential functions like digestion and immune repair. It's a survival mechanism. But here's the misconception. Cortisol isn't the bad guy.
Really? It gets a terrible rap.
You need cortisol to get out of bed in the morning. The problem isn't the spike, it's the recovery.
Okay, so a resilient person still gets the cortisol spike. They aren't some Zen master who feels nothing.
Exactly. In fact, highly resilient people often have a very sharp spike. They react quickly to danger. But, and this is the absolute key, they shut it down quickly. Their system resets to baseline rapidly once the threat is gone.
And what controls that shutdown? Is it just the absence of the threat?
No, it's an active braking mechanism, and this introduces a hormone that doesn't get enough press, DHEA.
DHEA.
Dehydroepiandrosterone.
I always stumble on that one. Let's stick to DHEA.
Yeah, DHEA is chemically very similar to cortisol, but it acts as a functional antagonist. It's like an antidote.
So if cortisol is the acid, DHEA is the base that neutralizes it.
That is a great analogy. Cortisol, if it's left high for too long, is neurotoxic. It can actually kill neurons in the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory. DHEA protects those neurons. It promotes neurogenesis. It physically blocks the receptors that cortisol tries to bind to.
So the secret sauce isn't just low stress. It's having a high ratio of DHEA to cortisol.
Yes. The DHEA to cortisol ratio is becoming one of the most reliable biomarkers for resilience. In studies, soldiers or first responders who have a higher ratio of DHEA perform better under extreme stress and have much lower rates of PTSD. They have a better biological buffer.
That's the chemistry. Now, what about the wiring? We talk about mental strength, but that has to map onto actual brain circuits. The source material mentions a resilience triad.
Right. So this involves 3 key brain regions. First, you have the amygdala. That's your smoke detector. It spots the threat, initiates the fear response. Second, the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. That's the CEO logic, planning, emotional regulation. And third, the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC, which is essentially the conflict monitor or the attention dial.
So in a non-resilient response, say I'm panicking, what's happening in that triad?
In a panic response, the amygdala hijacks the system. It screams, "Fire!" so loud that it completely drowns out the CEO. This is what we call bottom-up processing. The emotion rules the logic.
I have definitely been there. You know you're overreacting, but you just can't stop.
We all have. Now, in a resilient brain, the circuitry is different. There is a very strong, thick highway of neural connections running from the PFC down to the amygdala. This allows for what we call top-down regulation.
So the CEO has a direct line to the smoke detector and can turn it off.
The PFC assesses the situation and says, okay, I see the smoke, but it's just burnt toast. Reset the alarm. The stronger that connection is, specifically between the medial PFC and the amygdala, the faster you can calm yourself down.
And this brings us right back to the training analogy. Can we strengthen that connection? Or is it fixed?
It is absolutely plastic. It changes based on experience. Which brings us to the hamsters.
Say hamsters. I was reading this study with my jaw on the floor. It's the Syrian hamster study, and it is honestly one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for how experience literally rewires the brain. Walk us through the setup.
It uses what's called a resident intruder paradigm. Syrian hamsters are very territorial. If you put two males in a cage, they will fight to establish dominance. So the researchers take a hamster and they put it in a cage with a much larger, more aggressive bully.
So our hamster is the underdog.
Yes. And inevitably, the underdog loses. It gets defeated. Now, here's the really interesting part. After that defeat, if you put that same hamster in a cage with a smaller, non-aggressive hamster one it could easily beat, it won't fight.
It won't?
It cowers. It runs away.
It's traumatized.
It has developed conditioned defeat. Its brain has learned, I am a loser. I cannot win. And structurally, you can see changes in its brain. The amygdala becomes hyperactive. The PFC weakens.
That is heartbreaking. But there was a twist in the study, right?
There was. The researchers wanted to see if they could immunize the hamster against this defeat. So before the big fight with the bully, they gave the hamster a different experience. They put it in a cage with a smaller, weaker intruder.
They gave it an easy win.
They gave it 2 or 3 easy wins. They let it experience dominance. They call this the winner effect.
And what happened when that hamster, the one with the winning streak, finally met the bully?
It fought back. It didn't win. The bully was still bigger, but it didn't cower. And crucially, afterwards, it didn't show signs of conditioned defeat. It bounced back immediately.
So the experience of winning literally inoculated the brain against the trauma of losing later.
That is exactly what happened. And when they looked at the brains of these winner hamsters, they found that the winning experience had physically rewired the prelimbic and infralimbic cortex parts of the hamster PFC. It induced synaptic plasticity. It strengthened that top-down control we talked about.
That is a massive moment for me. It suggests that resilience isn't just about surviving trauma. It's about stacking up small wins. It's about feeling capable.
Exactly. Stress mastery changes the brain. If you only experience defeat, your brain wires for submission. If you experience overcoming a challenge, your brain wires for resilience.
Okay, I want to pivot here because we've been talking about resilience like it's the ultimate goal, the holy grail. But there is a darker side to this in the literature that I think we have to address. The cost of resilience.
Yes. This is a critical debate that has emerged very strongly in the 2020-2026 data. It challenges the assumption that bouncing back is always free.
The source material discusses the weathering hypothesis. Can you explain what that is?
The weathering hypothesis, originally from Dr. Arlene Geronimus, suggests that for marginalized communities, high-effort coping, basically, being resilient in the face of structural racism, poverty, and discrimination accelerates biological aging.
So on the outside, you look successful. You're getting the degrees, you're holding down the job, you're beating the odds. But on the inside?
On the inside, your body is paying the tax. There's a concept called John Henryism.
Named after the folklore hero.
Yeah.
The steel-driving man who raced the machine.
Yes. John Henry beat the steam drill, but he died of heart failure right after. The hypothesis describes individuals who have an intense commitment to hard work and determination to overcome obstacles. In unfair environments, these John Henrys often succeed socially and economically, but they have significantly higher rates of hypertension and cardiovascular disease.
That is a heavy realization. It implies that for some people, resilience is literally killing them.
It implies that resilience has a metabolic cost. If you have to spend 90% of your energy just to reach the starting line because of structural barriers, you're depleting your physiological reserves. You see high allostatic load, which is the wear and tear on the body.
So when we preach resilience to people in impossible situations, are we doing harm? Are we just telling them to weather themselves to death?
That is the ethical question at the heart of it. The expert consensus now is that we can't just teach individual resilience strategies like breathing exercises without also addressing the systemic stressors. True resilience isn't just mind over matter. It requires lowering the load so that the effort doesn't destroy the machine.
It's the difference between having a strong engine and driving that engine at 8,000 RPMs for 20 years.
Mm.
Eventually, the gaskets just blow.
Exactly. The body keeps the score.
I want to bring this down to the daily level for our listeners.
Yeah.
Most of us aren't hamsters fighting for territory, and hopefully we aren't facing systemic collapse every day. We're dealing with traffic, deadlines, a rude email, toddlers. How does this science translate to the daily grind?
There's a fascinating subset of research called daily resilience. These studies use what's called the experience sampling method. They ping people on their smartphones 5 times a day and ask, what just happened and how do you feel?
Okay, and what do they find?
They define resilience not by if you get stressed, but by the speed of your effective recovery.
An effective recovery, so the bounce back speed.
Right. Let's say you get a rude email at 9 a.m. Your cortisol spikes, your mood drops. Are you back to your baseline by 9:30? Or are you still ruminating and angry at 2 in the afternoon?
Oh, I am definitely guilty of the 2 p.m. fume. I hold on to it.
Most of us do. But the data shows that the duration of that negative emotional state is a better predictor of long-term health than the intensity of the stressor itself. If you sustain that stress response for hours, you are dripping cortisol onto your hippocampus all day long.
So the goal isn't to not get angry. It's to shorten the half-life of the anger.
Exactly, and this circles right back to the marathon analogy. Exposure to these manageable everyday stressors acts as the training load. Every rude email is a rep. If you can consciously practice recovering quickly, using your PFC to calm your amygdala, you are strengthening that neural highway.
So I should look at a traffic jam not as a disaster, but as a resilience workout.
In a way, yes. It's stress inoculation. You're inoculating yourself against future, larger stressors by mastering the small ones.
Is there a genetic component to this? Or are we all starting from the same baseline?
There is definitely a genetic component. We have to mention the serotonin transporter gene, 5-HTTLPR.
That's a mouthful.
It is. People with the short allele of this gene are often described as orchids. They're highly sensitive to their environment. If the environment is bad, they wither, they get depressed very easily. But if the environment is good, they thrive more than average.
And the other group?
The dandelions. They're less sensitive. They do okay pretty much anywhere, but they don't reach the same heights of super functioning in those ideal environments.
So if I'm an orchid, if I feel things really deeply, I'm not weak. I'm just highly responsive.
You have differential susceptibility. You're more malleable, which means resilience training might actually work better for you than for a dandelion.
That is really empowering. Okay, let's get into the toolkit. We've done the theory. If I want to upgrade my NeuroReality starting today, what are the evidence-based interventions? And I don't want just breathe. Give me the stuff that actually changes the biology.
Okay. I've pulled the top 4 from the meta-analyses. Number 1 is cognitive reframing, specifically what's called reappraisal.
How is that different from just positive thinking?
Positive thinking is often denial, everything is fine. Reappraisal is acknowledging the stress but changing the label. For example, you have to give a speech, your heart is racing, you can label that as fear, or you can label that as arousal.
I'm excited.
My body is mobilizing energy to help me perform. When you reframe threat to challenge, your blood vessels actually dilate differently. Seriously. In a threat state, your vessels constrict to prevent bleeding in case you get bitten. In a challenge state, they open up to oxygenate the brain.
That is wild. Just changing the word in your head changes the diameter of your veins.
The PFC talks to the autonomic nervous system. It's powerful. Number 2, gratitude journaling, but with a specific twist. The 3 good things exercise.
I tried this. You write down 3 things that went well.
But you have to write down why they went well. I had a great coffee because I took the time to visit that new shop.
Why does the why matter so much?
It forces you to recognize your own agency. It combats the brain's negativity bias. Our brains evolved to obsess over threats. Writing down the why forces your brain to encode the positive memory into long-term storage. It physically strengthens the neural pathways for optimism.
Number 3.
Mindfulness, but specifically for the purpose of decentering.
Decentering, what's that?
It's the ability to observe your thoughts without being the thought. So instead of I am angry, it's I am noticing a feeling of anger arising.
It creates a little gap.
That gap is the PFC stepping in. It reduces the activation of the default mode network, which is the brain circuit responsible for rumination and worrying about yourself.
And the last one?
Social connection. We cannot overstate this. It is the single strongest predictor of resilience, bar none. There's a study showing that when people look at a steep hill, they estimate the incline to be less steep if they are standing next to a friend.
Stop.
Really? Yes. Literally, the visual perception of the challenge changes based on social support. The brain calculates resources. If I have a friend, I have more resources, so the challenge is smaller.
That's the resilient nodes concept, right?
Yeah.
My brain literally offloads some of the stress processing to you.
Exactly. We are an obligate gregarious species. We co-regulate each other's nervous systems. Isolation is biologically expensive. Connection is an energy saver.
I love that. Connection is an energy saver. Okay, so I want to try that strength spotting exercise that was mentioned in the notes.
Yes. Pick a signature strength. Say, humor. Now, look at a stressor you have today, maybe a boring meeting. How can you apply humor to that stressor to transform it?
I could make a private game out of it, or find the absurdity in it.
Exactly. You move from being a victim of the meeting to an active player. You are the hamster winning the small fight. You are building agency.
This has been a massive download. Let's try to synthesize this for everyone listening.
Let's do it.
We started with the marathon. We learned that resilience isn't a fixed trait. It's a dynamic process. It's a muscle that needs training, but it also needs recovery.
We learned that it is multisystemic. Your resilience is tied to your biology, that DH-cortisol ratio, your brain wiring, that PFC amygdala highway.
And your environment.
Yeah.
The safety of your community.
Mm-hmm. We learned that winning small battles rewires the brain, but also that weathering big structural battles comes with a real physiological cost.
Yeah.
We have to be gentle with ourselves and others when the load is heavy.
And we learned that we can actually hack this system. Through reframing, connection, and stress inoculation, we can upgrade our capacity to handle that load.
Yeah.
So as we sign off, I want to leave everyone with a question. We usually ask ourselves, how can I get through this? But maybe, based on the hamster studies and the neuroplasticity data, we should be asking, how is this specific stressor training me?
That is the growth mindset right there.
And maybe more importantly, who is standing next to me at the bottom of the hill, making it look less steep?
Because resilience is never a solo sport.
Exactly. Thank you so much for breaking all this down with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to you, the listener, thank you for trusting us with your time. This has been a deep dive on